So for this extra 5th week of the Animals in Art project, I want to just draw things together and make some suggestions about a final stage, perhaps, in this process. So here are my drawings, sketches from the zoo of the giraffes, the monoprints, different experiments I tried with the different monoprint techniques, and then the collage piece. And I have, on the basis of those, perhaps the colour from the collage and I think the composition from the monoprints, I've put together a painting. And I've also been back to the museum to make some studies, particularly of the giraffes' heads, using 3 different quick, intuitive approaches to drawing in an attempt to find some essential features, some elements that will help me with the resolving of this painting, looking at what I want to emphasize, what I want to define, detail, draw attention to. So let me show you a quick bit of painting, and then I'll explain how those drawings came about and show you a bit of demonstrating at the museum. And then I'll return to this painting and try and put those final emphatic qualities to work in how I resolve and conclude the painting. So to a certain extent I've come full circle here, because I'm back to sketching my animal subject, but this time I'm looking for something slightly different. In a way, I'm looking for clues as to what exactly I should emphasize when I get to that stage of my painting, having been through a process of composing and working with monoprint and collage to find compositions and colour and so on. When I get to the final stages of the painting and I want to refine my animal subject, there will be particular things that I want to or need to emphasize. And so coming back to sketching the animal and using particular approaches, I'm hoping that I, as I say, get some clues about what should be emphasized, what is it that's characteristic about my subject. And you might recognize, or you certainly recognize these techniques, but if you recall when we were working with likeness back in March, I think it was, I reminded you of these 3 drawing techniques. This first one, the continuous line, and then a charcoal rub away, and then working on some grey paper. So this is my continuous line. You saw there I didn't take my pencil off the page, I've got a pastel pencil. And this is one of a number of sort of more instinctive ways of drawing, which I think, as I've said, will help yield clues. So if you work in this slightly more intuitive way, the continuous line forces you to make instinctive decisions. And I find that these sorts of drawings very often give you clues, whether it's to do with likeness, what is it that's essential about your subject, particularly in terms of shape, because the continuous line will just generate these spontaneous shapes. And that will be valuable, I hope, in how I'm going to resolve my painting. So our old friend charcoal rub away, covered the page with some charcoal and then sliding my stick of charcoal around the page. Drawing shapes, maybe even negative shapes. There's some dark behind. Could be called drawing without lines. It's another way of thinking about it. So putting in some dark, some light. It's not the easiest place to draw, I have to say. And I've got quite a funny view of my giraffe, but I think generally these things can be helpful if they lead to surprises. So if I understand something about my subject through having to work quickly and with a slightly awkward angle. I mean, one thing I have understood, I think, is kind of long triangular, the long triangular extended shape of the giraffe's head before we get to this quite small chin. And of course, the pattern is everything. I think you can put a giraffe pattern on a box and it'll look like a giraffe, especially if you give it long legs. So, the rub away technique, maybe the angle of the eye is something to notice as well. And the bump, as well as these horns and the ear. So there's lots of appendages when it comes to giraffes. So the third approach is a bit of a combination of the first two. This time I've got grey paper, and I can either start with a continuous line, or I could start with the side of the charcoal to put in some tonal shapes. Whichever I start with, I'll go on to the other approach. And then what I think is useful about this particular approach, because it's on grey paper, I'm going to add some white lines. Don't forget the ear. I'm going to add some white lines at the end, or some white marks, and those white marks really will be emphasis. They will make certain parts of the drawing stand out. And again, hopefully there are clues for me in what I end up emphasizing. There's a certain amount of colouring in this this giraffe's pattern. But actually, I think what I've learnt from this exercise, in all three drawings, actually is those amazing heavy eyelids that giraffes have. Apart from just the shape of the head that I mentioned, I think those lips and eyelashes, or eyelids rather, are something to emphasize. So this final stage is very much about emphasis. I have to ask myself, what is the point of the painting? What am I trying to say? And I have a couple of things in mind with my giraffe painting. The first is this kind of forest of giraffe necks and heads against the sky. And the second is some of those features, this heavy eyelid, the long pointed head with the small jaw. So those are the two things that I particularly want to bring out in my painting. So I've mixed some colours, and I think it's worth stressing that for this last stage, I think it's good to think in terms of not doing a lot. You know, small adjustments will bring out certain aspects of the painting. So it can help, I think, to have almost a short list of things that you think need doing and limit yourself to those. So in order to bring out the forest of necks and heads, I think it would help if the lower part of my painting was a lot darker. So that's a slightly major change that I probably should have been making when I did the blocking in yesterday, but I'll just do a quick bit now. So if I was to show you my palette, there's not that many colours prepared, not a lot of paint. So I would say at this stage, think in terms of not a lot of paint. But it seemed to me that if I were to darken the lower part of the painting, not only would I not have to paint legs, but I could draw a lot more attention to these necks against the sky. So that's what I've done there. And then this business of bringing out the shape of the giraffe's head, I think I'll do that next. So I've made a little bit of sky colour, and I'm going to work with the negative shape. Just to change something, and I've got a bit of a lump up here. So I may well have to paint positively as well, but I'll start with a negative shape a bit there. And then I've also got some colours for the head itself. I think the other thing I would do is get a bit more light in the sky. I think that could be quite helpful. Anyway, before I do that, let me just do a little bit to these faces, as it were. I've mentioned about the eyes, so I think I need to paint a little bit more positively. Might even need a tiny brush, a single hairbrush. So I want to get both the eye and something of the eyelid. So this is suddenly very specific what I'm doing, and that seems a little bit long. So this is quite small refinements. It's drawing, it's back to drawing again. But I think I can only do this because I've dealt with everything else. I've dealt with the composition, the effect of the sky, the effect of the grass and the darker lower part of the painting. So now I can make adjustments to the features, as it were. Well, it is the features, because that's something that I thought needed to be emphasised. So I'll just mix a little bit of lighter sky colour. So I've mixed some more colour for the sky, and it's actually a slightly warmer light, because I wanted to increase the contrast around these heads for the reason that I've stated, that I want to emphasize this forest of heads and necks. So that's it. Just a small adjustment. I don't know if that's quite right with the blue. There's still a little bit more adjusting to do. Might be worth getting a little bit of grey into that sky. But as I say, the point of this final stage for me here is to get clear in my mind what the painting is about, what's the emphasis, and there's a couple of things I was emphasising there. And what I did with both drawing and also adjusting some of the colour was intended to bring out that emphasis. So I'll leave it there. We've had these weeks sketching animals from life, trying some techniques, collage and monoprinting, to hopefully open up a process of putting these sketches to work to find surprising, interesting compositions, and try to identify a theme, an aim, a point to the compositions. And then here I've tried to give some suggestions about returning to drawing in order to get a little bit more information which might help in that final stage of identifying and achieving the emphasis in the composition that you first found. Okay, so look forward to seeing how your work has gone. And this has really been, although it's been animals as a theme, it's been to do with the process of developing a painting. So we will be going over these things again with our next themes and returning to some of these points. So maybe once you've been through it once, it'll make more sense, increasingly more sense, each time you return to the process. Okay, see you tomorrow then.